All right, so we went over price elasticity of demand. We went over the formula. We talked about how instead of that old formula, right, where we use new minus old over old, we're going to use this new midpoint formula. And that's so that the elasticity between, say, a price of 8 and 10 is the same as the elasticity between a price of 10 and 8, right? So it's bidirectional. So we're going to use that midpoint formula to get those percentage changes. We always have the price of something on the bottom, right? That's the way that we can remember. Quantity is always on the top. It's always the price of something on the bottom. So we're going to take the absolute value of the elasticity, and we're going to look at whether or not it's greater than 1 or if it's less than 1. If it's greater than 1, it's telling me that it's elastic, right? So it's like a rubber band. It adjusts, it stretches more than the price increase. So the quantity stretch is going to be more than the price increase. That's an elastic good. So very sensitive to prices. Whereas inelastic, the book talks about this tie down, right? That, it doesn't have very much give, right? Because it's meant to tie things down onto your truck or your car. And so an inelastic good is like a tie down where it does not move that much when the price changes, right? So inelastic, we use the acrostic of insolent. Insolent, inelastic. It's an easy mnemonic to remember. It's something that you can't live without. If the price increases, you are not able to decrease your quantity demanded by as much as maybe you would like to. So again, because of the law of demand, this is always, always, always going to be a negative value. So we ignore the minus sign, we take the absolute value of it so that we can discuss it in ways that make sense. Because it just doesn't make sense to talk about a -2 elasticity and how that's greater than a 0.5 elasticity or something like that, right? Because obviously it's less than if we're talking about the number line. So we always use the absolute value. When it's an elasticity of demand, we just know that there's an inverse relationship between the price and the quantity. So we went ahead and we calculated the elasticity for chapter 4, problem number 2. And then we talked about the different things that cause elasticity to change and be more inelastic or elastic. We know that in the long run, especially with supply, it's most elastic. So the long run supply, the long run elasticity is determined by how changeable the company can make those inputs. So if they're making, semi-trailer, tractor-trailer tires, and all of a sudden the price for auto tires increases, how quickly can they change to making auto tires instead of tractor-trailer tires? So same thing with farmers. How quickly can farmers plant a different crop if they see that the price of a different crop has increased? So we left off talking about income elasticity of demand. And again, so this is the price on the bottom, right? It's your income. It's the price of your hour, the price of your year of work. So again, that's the way that I remember it, is I remember that the price of something is always on the bottom. The only thing we're going to take the absolute value of and ignore the minus sign is the own price elasticity of demand. Whenever it's a cross price elasticity of demand, an income elasticity of demand, we're always going to keep those signs because they tell us something. They give us information. So if it's positive, that tells me that it's a normal good. As my income increases, I buy more of that good, right? So that's your TVs, your Xboxes, your streaming services, Spotify, nicer clothes, et cetera, right? And if the elasticity is negative, well, that's telling me that as my income increases, I'm going to buy less of that. That's ramen noodles, that's store brand toilet paper, store brand mac and cheese, that kind of stuff. It's bus tickets, right? It's maybe a bicycle compared to buying a car, so on and so forth, right? So those are what's called inferior goods. So any questions on elasticity, what we went over last class?
Could we do another problem?
Yeah. Let's find a problem. Just a regular elasticity. Do we want to do a?
Just one similar like what we did for like question number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking, for sure. So let's. Of course, I didn't bring my book today, so I gotta go through the ebook. But I'll get there in 1 second. Chapter 4. Questions. All right, that was the graph data. All right, let's do number 9. So before we do cross-price elasticity of demand, let's do an example. So this is chapter 4, problems, page 107 of the e-text, number 9. Pardon me. All right, so we are told there was a legal settlement over state healthcare claims in 1999. The U.S. tobacco companies were forced to raise the price of cigarettes from $1.95 to $2.45. The decline in cigarette sales was estimated to be around 8%. What does this imply for the elasticity of demand for cigarettes? So let's try to go ahead and do this on our own. So, and remember to use that midpoint formula. Even though we're given here a direction, let's still go ahead and use that midterm formula. right, so let's go ahead and go through this together as a group. So the first thing, we are given half of the problem for us, right? We're given this 8%. We're told that's the decline in the quantity demanded, so we just put that right into, we put that right into the numerator. Then we are told the price information, 195, oh, that's not a highlighter, 195 to 245. And so that is our P1 and P2. And so we know that when we take a percentage change in price, it's equal to P2 minus P1 over P1 plus P2 divided by 2. And so that's exactly what I do over here. I take P2, 245, P1, 195. I add them up. They are switched over here in the bottom, but that's totally legit. As long as you have enough parentheses, you end up with the right answer, which is 0.227. You multiply it by 100 to get a percentage, and you end up with 22.7%. The percentage change in price is 22.7%, which makes sense because 20% of $2 is about 40 cents, and it increased by about 50 cents, right? So then we take that 8% that we were given at the beginning, we put that in the numerator, we take that 22% that we got there, and we end up with 0.35. Now, 0.35 is what? Elastic or inelastic? Inelastic. Very good. It's less than 1, so it's inelastic. So the response to the change in price is not that much, right? Quantity demanded is not going to respond that much to the change in price, which makes sense because tobacco is an addictive substance, right? Just like coffee. Another thing that has a very low elasticity. Also, $2.45, depending on how many packs you smoke a week or whatever, right, is not a very large portion of your income overall. And we know that things that are a small portion of our income have relatively low elasticities. So, you know, salt and milk and bread and all these kind of things, right, they could increase in price by 20 or 50%. And, you know, it goes from $3 to $3.75. We don't really notice. We don't really care. We're always going to buy that bread. We're always going to buy, you know, a gallon of milk or whatever the case may be, right? Questions on that? Thanks for the prompt. Good? Let's see about doing, while we're doing some questions, let's see about doing a price elasticity of supply question, because that one is a little difficult. It's a little not what we're used to. Let's find one. All right, here we go. Number 5 on the problems page, which it's not actually giving me a number right now, weirdly enough. But, I mean, I'm guessing it's page 108 on your text, right? That would make sense. So there's, sorry, I think the last one was actually on the questions page. This one is on the problems page because they are different for some weird reason. So next example. So this, we're assuming it's on page 108. And this is number 5. All right, so we are asked what's the formula for measuring the price elasticity of supply, right? So that one's pretty easy. We can just go back in our notes and take a look here, and oh, it makes sense because the price is always on the denominator, right? So instead of quantity demanded, it's just quantity supplied. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to rewrite that formula down here. So the elasticity of the quantity supplied and the price of some good X is equal to the percentage change in the quantity supplied of that good X divided by the percentage change in the price of that good X. So we're told that the price of apples increases from 20 bucks a box to 22 bucks a box. In a direct response, Goldsboro Farms supplies 1,200 boxes of apples, and it used to be 1,000. So this is my quantity supplied new. This is my quantity supplied old. But for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter what's new and old. I just need to associate the right price with the right quantity. I can calculate it both ways, and because of the midpoint method, it's still going to give me the same exact answer. So really, we can just think of this as Q1 and Q2, and this is Q1, or sorry, easy to mess up. Oh yeah, that is Q1. No, Q1 should be old. Too easy to mess up. Let's rewrite this and have old first and new. So quantity supplied goes from 1,000 to 1,200 boxes. So this, pardon me, is Q1, this is P1, this is P2, and this is Q2. Again, we could have done it either way, but just to keep that conceptual compatibility and clarity, I'd like to have the second price be P2 and the second quantity be Q2. So that means that I have this pair, right? I've got a pair of 1,020, and I've got another pair of 1,222, right? If we wanted to think of this as my Q1, Q2, or sorry, Q1, P1. And my Q2, P2. If we were doing like a Cartesian coordinate plane, right? This would be our Q axis, this would be our P axis, right? So there would be 20, 22, there would be 1,000 supply at 20, and then there would be 1,200 supply at 22, which makes sense. If we connect those, we get an upward sloping supply curve, right? We have a little bit of the supply curve that we're given. So we're asked to calculate the elasticity of this supply curve. We know that it's always going to be positively sloping, right? It's always going to be positive. There's a direct relationship between price and quantity, right? As the price increases, the existing suppliers are going to want to supply more. And so what is the sensitivity to price that those existing suppliers have? That's what we're asking, that's what we're figuring out in the elasticity equation. So one of the nice things about this elasticity equation, I'll show you right now, is that the 2's cancel out. So for a second, let's go and unpack each one of these things. We're going to solve it all as one giant problem this time, just for fun. So we end up on the numerator with Q2 minus Q1 over Q2 plus Q1 divided by 2. And then on the denominator here, we end up with P2 minus P1 over P2 plus P1 divided by 2. So what ends up happening is these 2's cancel out. So if we want to solve all of this at the same exact time, we can just ignore the 2's. So since there's a 2 in both of the denominators of the terms, they cancel each other out. And so this then just ends up being Q2 minus Q1 over Q2 plus Q1 divided by P2 minus P1 over P2 plus P1. So at this point, it's just plug and chug, right? So we're doing 1,200 minus 1,000 all over 2,200 divided by 22 minus 20 all over 42. This ends up giving us an answer of 0.1818 divided by 0.095, which gives us an answer of 1.91. So this is greater than 1, so therefore we would say that the supply is elastic. The supply is more responsive to price changes than in terms of percentage, quantity, and changes. Did everybody get that? Cool. So there's two ways you can do it. You can either calculate both separately, or you can do it all at once. It is absolutely, completely up to you. All right, let's go ahead and get back to notes now and do some cross-price elasticity of demand, and then we'll start, then we'll take a break and we'll watch that video, and then we'll start chapter 4. Chapter 4? Chapter 5. Yeah, sorry, this is all mislabeled, so sorry. 4 should be elasticity, chapter 5 is market failures. All right, cross-price elasticity. Woo! So cross-price elasticity of demand is really the thing that's telling us, it's indicating whether two goods are related. And specifically, if they are complements or substitutes. So our formula for the cross-price elasticity of demand, again, we always have a percentage change in the quantity on the numerator, but this time it's going to be the quantity of product X divided by the percentage change in the price of a different product, of product Y. So again, best thing to do with these kind of things is to go and do some problems with some example here. All right, so we are told, so we're going to do 7A, again in the problems. And we're told some information. We're given this schedule about Lorna. She likes to play golf. The number of times that she plays, though, depends on the costs of her other type of entertainment. It's also her income, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So the 3 demand schedules show how many rounds of golf she will play each year under different scenarios. There should be, wait, let's find the simpler one that doesn't have a big chart. 1 second. Bear with me 1 second. Well, let's just do the simple one then. So not problems, questions. 11. So in 11, we're told that the cross-price elasticity for products A and B is plus 3.6. What can we conclude about how these products are related, right? So let's think about this. If it's a positive number, let's just say for the sake of argument that there's a 10% increase in the price of this other good, right? So let's just put in, let's say price increased by 10%. So this would be positive 10% on the bottom, and this is the thing that we're solving for on the top, essentially, right? So at this point, it's a pretty simple algebra problem where we can just multiply both sides by positive 10%, and we end up with an x, which is the percentage change in the quantity demanded, being what? 36%, right? So much larger than the price change, which was 10%. So the reason why it's much larger is because the elasticity is positive. So what is this telling me? This is telling me that when the price of A increases by 10%, the quantity of B also increases, right? Because positive 3.6 times positive 10% is positive 36%, right? So the quantity also increases by 36%. So what do we call this? If the price of something else increases and that impacts the quantity of the stuff that you're selling. So what if you were running an ice cream shop and there was a frozen yogurt stand that opened up right in front of you, but then all of a sudden there was a frozen yogurt shortage and they had to increase their prices? What would happen to the demand at your ice cream shop? It would increase. So this happens whenever things are substitutes. If the price of hot dogs increases by 10%, you're going to go and you're going to buy hamburgers instead. You know, if the price of almond milk increases by a lot, I'm going to buy soy milk or coconut milk or cashew milk or one of the other fake milks, right? So there's a lot of substitutability in between them for me. I also might just buy half and half and just say screw it. So whenever it's positive, there's substitutes. So then we're asked, well, what about products C and D? The elasticity of products C and D is equal to negative 5.4. So again, we can do the same kind of thing, right? We got to unpack this. This is equal to the percentage change in the quantity demanded of good X divided by the percentage change in the price of good Y. We say, let's have the price of Y increase by 10%, just so that we have an example, right? So negative 5.4 is equal to X over positive 10%. So how do we get rid of this 10% and isolate X? We just multiply both sides by 10%. Cancels, it annihilates itself. Positive 10% times negative 5.4 is negative 54%. That's my X, that's my percentage change in my quantity demanded. So what is this saying? This is telling me that when the price of Y increases by 10%, the quantity demanded of my good X decreases by 54%. So what kind of good is this? We just had substitutes. The substitute was when they both went in the same direction. Got to be a complement, right? So this is the hot dog buns and hot dogs, right? Or hamburger buns and hamburgers. This is tennis shoes and socks. This is shrimps and cocktail sauce. Bicycle and bicycle tires, cars and gasoline. So those are complements, necessary to each other. So what if my cross-price elasticity between goods M and N is 0, or very close to 0? They're just not related. And there are lots of goods that are not related, right? So there are going to be some goods that we're going to calculate and they're not going to have a positive or a negative elasticity to them. So business and regulatory decisions, our last thing before we take a break and watch our video. So applying the analysis here. So the degree of substitutability influences the decision making of both firms and governments. So a firm that produces similar products like Coke and Pepsi, or sorry, Coke and Sprite, with low cross-price elasticity. So if they're weak substitutes, they can lower the price of one good with little to no effect or impact on sales of the other product. So a lot of times you might have difficulty when you're writing deciding whether or not to use affect or effect, right? You know, like, do I use the A or the E? Just skip the whole mess, just use impact. Impact always works. Just always just use impact. Don't even bother trying to figure it out. Just impact. It's a good go-to. And so as a result of this, the government, in its infinite wisdom, will likely block mergers between firms that are producing a very strong substitute product, right? Close substitutes. Very similar products. Now, how well they've actually been doing this is, you know, debate for another day, right? I mean, we just had Sprint merge with T-Mobile, right? Like, and we only have 5 or 6, you know, big cell phone companies as it is. So the government really hasn't been, you know, stepping in like they used to block these mergers of very similar goods. So they'll likely block mergers between things with very similar goods, and they'll likely allow mergers between firms producing goods with low or zero cross elasticity. So, for example, cola and gasoline. If all of a sudden BP wanted to buy Dr. Pepper from Pepsi or something, the government would be like, oh, okay, I guess. You guys want to get into sodas? Sure. But if, Fanta or something like that tried to merge with Pepsi, then they'd be like, I don't know about that. It's kind of extreme.
Question.
Yeah.
So Arby's just bought Buffalo Wild Wings. Would that be close enough to be cross-elastic firm, or no? Because it would be unnecessary.
I mean, let's think about it. If you go to Arby's and all of a sudden the price of a roast beef sandwich is higher, are you going to necessarily go to Buffalo Wild Wings or vice versa? So like you go to Buffalo Wild Wings for the environment, to watch the games and to, eat the beers and drink, eat the beers, to eat the wings and drink some beers and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so I would say that they're far enough that they don't have that. Yeah. There was also an interesting merger that just happened with Panera Bread buying Caribou Coffee and Einstein Bagels. And so, which, makes sense with, and again, it's one of those things where, had Panera Bread tried to buy like Noodles and Company, that probably would have been too close. But, buying a coffee company and buying a bagel company, it's a lunch place. So again, it's not, exactly close substitutes. But yeah, the phone companies though, that one was just, I don't know what happened there. I mean, there's this thing called regulatory capture, which is this phenomenon in economics where essentially the special interests end up providing so much funding to the politicians and the other people that the very regulators that are supposed to be there holding people accountable are captured by these special interests, right? So there's a certain degree of that happens in the United States, and that might be what happened with the cell phones, right? We just don't know. But yeah, these are very good questions. Absolutely. Yeah, mergers and stuff are very, very interesting in all the different sectors. Mergers, and then you also hear of what are they called? Reverse acquisitions, which is just like a merger. It's just another name for a merger. So you hear that sometimes too if you're reading the news, the financial news. They'll talk about that, and it's really just a merger. Okay, let's go ahead and pause this.